call this meeting to order. Siyam Natsiya, Ichqualawan Kwana Silam Nola. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the lands of the Halkomeetum speaking people, specifically the Kwamitsan village. The Board of Education is honored to be able to collaboratively walk beside the Cowichan tribes, Malahat, Subasat, Halalt, Penelakut, Stamatis, and Liaxan peoples who have cared for this land for thousands of years. May we walk gently on the unceded territories of their lands as we work together to lift up all the Hahasmana. Trustees, before we get to the adoption of the agenda, I would like to reverse numbers 3 and 4, please. So with that change, I would like a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Moved by Trustee Susan, seconded by Trustee Lise. All those in favor? Thank you. And before we get into Secretary Treasurers, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the Secretary Treasurer and staff for all the hard work. I know exactly what it takes for you guys to go through this process, and I'd like to thank you for all that you have done to make sure that it went well. And I would also like to take an opportunity to thank you two gentlemen. We have seen each other for a lot of years now, and I am very thankful that you are here in this position during our audit, as you'll be able to find anything that, should there be something wrong, because you're so familiar with who we are and what we do. So I just want to thank you for continuing to support us and just being there as auditors to talk with the board when we need to talk. So thank you. Mr. Cyclist.
Thank you, Chair. This is a big day for the Finance Department when we get to present to the board the audited financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2025. This is the measurement of the board's performance to budget and how our financial performance has aligned with expectations. To begin, I'm going to go straight to the action item that I have on the agenda for the basis of time for our auditors. I want to introduce Darren Freer and Trevor Wan, who have joined us today from Baker Tilly, Victoria, and they'll be providing an overview for the board of the 24-25 financial statements and the auditor's related comments. In your agenda package, just before this item, you'll see the financial statement discussion and analysis document. And this is a document designed to provide the reader of the financial statements with an analysis of the financial performance of the school district. And it does have a lot of photos and charts, and it's really designed to simplify the understanding of what actually happened with the finances of the school district. So for instance, it will have a description of all the types of capital work that the board engaged in last year, not just a number for buildings. What buildings was it? What was the type of work? This is an example. It talks about enrollment and talks about a number of other factors. And it's in your package, and it will be submitted to the Ministry of Education and Childcare following the adoption of the financial statement. So I encourage you all to read it at your leisure to get a better understanding of the financial performance. Before I pass to Darren and Trevor, I have my own acknowledgements to make. Firstly, I'd like to thank the school district's financial team. The preparation of the financial statements and notes went very smoothly this summer. So thank you to Claudia and Carrie, who are here joining us, and Claire, who also works on them, Sherry, Heather, Brianne, Naomi, Alicia, Lindsay, Mel, Dave, and Louise, which make up the finance department. Thank you for the board, for all the trustees, for your work of continuing to closely monitor the district's financial position through regular reports that you receive, and implementing policies and practices that ensure sound fiscal management. And to the auditors and their team for their work on site and back on site and back at their offices to ensure that we're ready today to present these statements. So the financial statements provide information to the reader about the school district's financial position and performance for the school ended June 30th, 2025. And the purpose of the audit is so that the reader of these financial statements has assurances that they accurately reflect the financial activities of the school district. So they've been independently reviewed. The year-end balances that we present are compared to our annual budget that's adopted before the start of the school year. And that helps us highlight any variances that have occurred from what we thought was going to happen when the board adopts the budget in May to what actually happened, although there is an amended budget process that also takes place. So some of the big comparisons some of the big things that happened is the board, through our enrollment projections, we believed in 24-25 that there would be a slowdown on growth on the number of students, that the board would be increasing year over year. But unexpectedly, 140 students was the drop, which was likely a result of outmigration from our community of families. So instead of being up 70, we were down 149. That's a variance of about 220 students. Special purpose funding again supported food programs in schools, which was really important work. And for the for the June 30th, 2025, the unrestricted surplus is just under 4.4 million. And last year it was just under 4.4 million. So really the financial position of the board is almost exactly the same as it was at this time last year. So with that, I'll pass over to Darren and Trevor to walk through the financial statements.
Okay, thanks for having us today. First of all, Jason, if you could fast forward to our independent auditors report, I'd just like to touch on a couple of points there.
Yes, I will. And that is page 80 in the package.
And so what you'll see is our report is addressed to the board, and the report has not changed versus the report you saw last year. However, there are a couple of things I'd like to walk you through. The first paragraph states our audit opinion, and that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with section 23.1 of the Budget Transparency and Accountability Act. Continuing on, the next paragraph discusses that we are independent of the district and that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide our opinion. And later in the report, it states that the financial statements of the report are the responsibility of the board's management, and the management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. Our responsibility as auditors is to express an opinion on the financial statements. Right below the opinion paragraph, you will see the emphasis of matter paragraph. And this paragraph is again stating the financial statements are prepared in accordance with section 23.1 of the Budget Transparency Act, as is all school districts in British Columbia. Okay. And as Jason mentioned a moment ago, I'd like to reiterate in the financial statements, occasionally you'll see a budget column, and that is the original budget column as adopted by the board, not the amended budget. So what we'd like to do next is walk you through two of the statements within the package to illustrate the financial statement highlights of the year. So Jason, if you could please turn to Schedule 2.
Page 112 of the package.
Correct.
And this is titled the Schedule of Operating Operations. And you will note the operating surplus for the year. I'm about halfway down in the middle column. As the operating surplus for the year is $213,882. There you go. When added to the opening surplus at the beginning of the year of 8.49 million, there was a total surplus at the end of the year of 8.7 million. Now of that, you'll see just below, the district has restricted or set aside 4.3 million for the coming year, thus resulting in an unrestricted surplus of 4.38 million. Okay, so now if we could just scroll up just a few rows, I'd like to look at the revenue section next. So I'm largely going to look at that top section there, about the first 6 or 7 lines. On the revenue side of the equation, you'll see total actual revenues of 109.26 million on a budget of 108.2 million. And you'll see it's up from 107.4 million spent last year. It's a 1.7% increase in revenue versus last year, and as a result of a few different factors. There was a funding increase in the block rate, despite an enrollment decrease. There was an increase in international student revenue, an increase in out-of-school care fees revenue, and an offset you will see on the investment income line. You'll see that investment income is down versus the prior year, largely driven by the decrease in interest rates that we're all seeing. So overall, 109.2 million in revenue versus a budget just slightly to the left there of 108. Okay. So now what I'd like to do is, the next section is the expenses, but there's a different schedule that further breaks those expenses down, and it's better illustrative of a better illustration of what happened. So if we could turn to Schedule 2B, a couple pages later. And this is the schedule of operating expenses by object. So what this schedule does is it takes those same expenses but groups them by similar expenses district-wide. First item there you'll see is teacher salaries, by far the biggest expense. And 43.8 million was spent this year, and that's above the amount spent in the prior year and is consistent with budget. This correlates with the salary increase received during the year and was offset by the enrollment decrease and therefore a decrease in the number of teachers, and then offset by the always changing staff mix that occurs during the year. The next line down is principals and vice principals, and you'll see that that expense line increased over last year and is under budget. And a component there is that there were two individuals that were originally budgeted in that area moved down to the other professionals line, which is a few lines down. So you'll see that line, a little bit more was spent versus budget. That's just a transfer from one category to another. I'd like to point out substitutes. You'll see that the 2025 results are over the 2024 results, meaning more was spent this year. However, it's about 10% under budget. We're again noticing, as we did last year, less absent replacement requirements here in the district. The next subcategory is employee benefits, and you'll see that the actual 2025 results was a little more spent than in 2024 and is under budget by 2.5%. The increase over the prior year, again, is consistent with the increase in salaries, but the big driver was the increase in the various budget, or the various benefit costs. Moving down, the final section of expenses you'll see is the services and supplies section. And this area is under budget and underspent versus the prior year. 10.0 million spent on a budget of 10.7. And at play here are three main fluctuations. There was a decrease this year spent on legal and professional fees, a reduction in the dual credit tuition fees to VIU, and going in the other direction, an increase spent on utilities, although under budget. So overall, you'll see operating expenses this year were 108.9 million, spent on a budget of 110.7. So in summary, as we've noticed as we've noted the last few years, it was a year where everything was pretty tight. The net actual results closely paralleled your budget. Again, resulting in a 4.38 unrestricted surplus on total expenses of 108.9 million. So we'd like to thank your district staff and Jason, Claudia, and your team for all your great work. And thanks for having us.
You bet. Trustees, any questions? Mr. Sandquist.
Respecting the time of our auditors, but I do have a couple of another schedule or note that I would like to bring to your attention. Just waiting for it to load here.
While you're waiting, Trustee Susan, did you have your hand up for a question? No. Okay.
So part of the board approving these financial statements is approving what is internally restricted. So when the auditors presented the surplus here a moment ago, they talked about there being $8.7 million in total surplus, of which 4.381 is internally restricted. The unrestricted total, if I can find it here in my financial statements, is $4,328,000. And what that's made up of, for transparency with the board here, is you use almost $2.6 million of this year's surplus to balance, last year's surplus to balance off this year's budget. So you remember when we were going through the budget process, we were projecting what the surplus was going to look like and access some of that to carry forward and help balance. That's the first number that you see here. There was some funding that has been restricted for careers to allow some programming to happen in the summer. The board were recipients of an award from the Canadian School Board Association that has not been allocated anywhere. So it's being held, it's part of the surplus, but is being held as it's committed to a future use. The board permits the rollover of 10% of the school supply budgets and the full rollover of learning resources. And so that total is about $260,000. That allows schools to save for future learning resources and not to have to rush and spend their supply budgets in June, because if they have that 10% that they can roll over, they're not trying to spend it all in the last month. There's also 21st century furniture. So there were commitments made on the 24-25 when the board awarded their $75,000 budget out. Not every school was able to purchase what had been given to them. So we're holding that back. Technology equipment sales, there are often technology that comes back off lease, such as iPads that then get sold out to staff members or community. So there's some profits there, or not profits, but proceeds there that are being restricted to go back into the tech department. And then the final one that the board is restricting if these financial statements are approved is another $30,000 for snow removal equipment. So we made a commitment right at the end of the year to buy a third snow removal vehicle, and it needed outfitting. We had a limited budget, and it needed another $30,000 to bring it, up to add to its longevity. So there was a service requirement, but also we had to buy the blades and we had to buy the sanders, and now we believe we're properly equipped with this restriction. Other constraints here are things that have come from other parties, such as BC Ed Plan. The CUPE collective agreement has contractual commitments. There's an Indigenous Education Council that the board receives funding for that belongs to the council, and it wasn't spent. It was $118,000, spent $11,000, so it rolls over. That council got started a little late in the year. And then the Indigenous Education target being the other big one there, $672,000. So you have targeted funding through your grant that must only be spent on Indigenous learners on an enhanced program of studies, was underspent by $672,000. That comes over to the next year. And the Indigenous Education Council just worked with that number and made some commitments of approximately $400,000 to support learning this year. And then Integrated Child and Youth, the grant arrived before the services. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. The other point I'll make on these statements is that they're consolidated. The auditors have reviewed the operating fund, which is really, I think, what the board are really concerned about. It's what you have the most control over. But there are also special purpose funds, and there's nothing really a surprise in there. The Feeding Futures was a big special purpose fund where a lot of food was purchased. The Classroom Enhancement Fund, all the extra teachers that have been put in place with the Restored Teacher Collective Agreement language, the annual facility grant, and Community Link being the big ones, and they were all spent in alignment with our expectations. When we go to the capital funds, two big things happened in the last year. One, the board sold Salmonos Elementary to the Conseil Scolaire Francophone. And so there's some entries around what that looks like. And the other one is Cowitson Secondary opened. And so it went out of a work in progress inventory matter into an actual building. So the financial statements reflect that school is now actively being used. So that are just some of the things I wanted to bring to your attention in relation to these statements without going through every one of those schedules. Because I think the real important story is that the board is almost in the same financial position as you were last year at this time. So you're weathering inflation and cost pressure as well.
So, any questions? Hearing none, we have a motion before us that the Board of Education of School District 79, Cowichan Valley adopts the 2024-2025 financial statements, moved by Trustee Sousa, seconded by Trustee Croft. All those in favor? Thank you. And Board, we're just going to pause for a sec because we want to sign some documents so that the auditors can leave with them.
If I may, Chair, while that's happening, just to convey my sincere thanks and appreciation for all the hard work by Secretary Treasurer and his staff. So, hands up to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Sousa.
Is it in the wrong one? Shoot. We'll do it. We don't need one. I'm going to put that one away. That's.
See you later. Thank you. Yeah, good to see you, Temple.
Yeah.
Can we do that one later?
Yeah. I know. When the weather's like this, though, you have to.
Yeah.
Like Jack.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
See you again soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
See you soon. Take care.
Did you have all the stuff we need signed?
I'll be right now.
Oh, okay. Because we can career down. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Take the signs in your spot.
They only take one.
They'll take one.
Yeah.
2 minutes or down.
Perfect.
Madam Chair, I might have to leave a little early.
I'm driving back with my wife.
I'll slip away.
Yeah, fly back.
Mr. Doman, Mr. Doman, if we could continue with the meeting? Thank you. Secretary Treasurer, 4.2.1.2.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share the screen again as I move to my next two items, which are both action items. So I'm going to go to page 127. Package. Put that up here on the screen. So what we have this time of year, the board are required to submit the minor capital plan. So this is the items that are of a more minor nature to the ministry program. There's also a major capital plan, which will be around new schools or site acquisitions, and that will come later. That will come later in the year. So what we have here is a total ask under the minor capital plan that we're going to be asking the Ministry of Education and Child Care for, which is $5.2 million. That is made up of the following projects, and these are in order of priority, not in order of priority. They're actually within the categories. They're in order of priority, but the first category here is under renovation building envelope program. So what we're asking for is $997,500. That's actually the maximum amount, even though it seems like an amount that is interesting or not round. That's the maximum amount we're able to apply for. And so this could be a multi-year project at Alex Aiken to deal with the external part of the building. The other three things we have here down on the list are buses. And so these, again, are 3 school buses. We are trying to get these buses with lifts in them. And so these are full-size buses with lifts that allow for more participation in field trips and maybe not some of the segregation that occurs with having to send out a second bus or a smaller bus out. We can accommodate some of the students on our existing runs if we have more buses with lifts. We can accommodate students to travel with their classes when we have a lift as one is required on a field trip, for instance. So we believe this is our priority in the bus fleet right now, but it does drop down a few seats of each school bus in order to accommodate that, but consistent with the board's priority or under direction. Next category here is the carbon neutral program, which we're asking for some HVAC support for Lake Cowichan. This is one of their oil-fired boilers. And so this hopefully will reduce some of the requirements for the pellets that are out there and get their heating a little bit better. We know we've had some issues with the heating in that school. And then we have the PEP program. So this is the playground program. Our top priority right now is Alexander. It's not the new playground, but there's another playground on the side that requires attention. And then Tanzer Drinkwater. I'm not optimistic that this one will be in this next cycle. We've been experiencing about one every other year, but this is a limited fund with the province, and we got Coheman's playground this year. So I think we may be a year delayed, but we still put them in, hoping to get funding for it. And the last category here is roofing and additional HVAC under another program. And so that we're looking for about $2.1 million to address the roofs at Tanzer, Alexander, Duncanelle, Lake Cowichan, and the dust collector system at Duncan Elementary, which is really Seavolk and the gym out back where they have the shop needs an upgrade on its dust extraction. So these are the projects that we're looking for support from the board to submit to the ministry.
Trustees, any questions? There you go. We have a motion before us. In accordance with the provisions under Section 142(4) of the School Act, the Board of Education of School District 79, Cowichan Valley hereby approves the proposed 5-year capital plan minor capital programs for the 2026-27 as provided on the 5-year capital plan summary for 2026-27 submitted to the Ministry of Education and Child Care. Moved by Trustee Doman, seconded by Trustee Lise. All those in favor? Thank you.
I just want to say I didn't come up with that motion. That came from the province. I know it's wordy. It doesn't sound like us, but it's
okay.
It's the way they wrote it for us. The next program that we'll be submitting at the end of this month will be there's another round of food infrastructure capital money, and so we're looking to improve some of the ventilation where we put in the stoves and where we put in the refrigeration. At some various locations, and so there's a schedule of all those locations that isn't in the package, but we're looking to get a maximum of $200,000 again from that program.
Any questions, trustees? Trustee Lise?
Just the previous one. When is the timeline that we find out if we are successful for our ask?
It's usually a spring. It's common that the ministry will call the operations department and myself and give us a bit of heads up of the ones that they think they're going to be able to support, so we can begin to get our plans rolling, and then you should usually know around the same time as our other funding comes out, around March 15th.
This one as well? Okay.
Any other questions? Trustee Sousa?
Yeah, thank you. So I know this is a roll-up, so I'm curious, how many schools are we talking about here in that will be covered?
I don't think it's that many, actually, because ventilation, where there isn't ventilation, is really quite expensive. Trustee Sousa, I think its scope is around 6 schools.
Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. In accordance with the provisions under Section 142(4) of the School Act, the Board of Education of School District 79, Cowichan Valley hereby approves the proposed 5-year capital plan food infrastructure program for 2026-2027 as submitted to the Ministry of Education and Child Care. Moved by Trustee Doman, seconded by Trustee Sousa. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary Treasurer. Now, Superintendent, 3.1.1.
Thank you. Through your chair, on page 3 through 48 in your package, the Enhancing Student Learning report is there for your approval. And what we're looking at, I did have an opportunity to speak with Assistant Superintendent Rowan. I'm just going to note that I made recommendation for part 1. On the cover page, which is page 3, to have our territorial acknowledgement added to the cover. And part 2 of the document, page 37, as suggested previously in the Board Education and Business Committee meeting. This change has occurred on page 37. Cowichan Tribes is inserted in place of Cowichan. And I've also made this suggestion to Assistant Superintendent Rowan that also on page 37 under district context, where it says Indigenous, and then it says which includes Inuit and Métis. I've also suggested that we add First Nations in there, so First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Other than that, the document is as presented to you.
Any questions, trustees? All right, we have a motion before us. My chart just dropped. That the Board of Education of School District 79, Cowichan Valley approves the Enhanced Student Learning Report, September 2025. Moved by Trustee Doman, seconded by Trustee Sousa. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Trustee Pratt, seconded by Trustee Sousa. All those in favor? I love it when you guys smile when I say that. Thank you.